Well, shalom everybody, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to continue looking at the duties of the mind, a new translation commentary by Rabbi Avigdor Miller. And this will be a 10-part series, a 10-volume set based off the works of Rabbi Bakya ibn Pekuda. And here is my little 2-volume pocket-size edition here, which was written almost a century ago and delves into the area of Musar, particularly focusing on how a person conducts themselves with their thoughts, with their mind. And the work, the Chabad HaLevavot, the original work, Duties of the Heart, has now been extrapolated into this seminal work that's building before our eyes called Duties of the Mind, because it is the mind and the heart which should be in alignment with each other. And this is the challenge that we all face, that we bring our mind in accordance with good action. We don't just show good actions externally, and internally we're carrying on with all these terrible things in our mind, because eventually that's going to come out in our speech. It's going to come out in our action if we continue to cradle a life of thinking things that we shouldn't, thinking inappropriate things. So we're up to page 98. We're up to page 98, and we are still looking at the author discussing with himself and allowing the reader to become privy to all this as to the actual merit of such a sefer, such a book on the subject of duties of the mind. And we've previously looked at the actual realm of logic. What does logic have to say about what, Rabbi Bakya is actually going to speak about? And then he's gone on to actually look at the Torah itself and see what the Torah actually has to say about the subject. And now he's looking at what the sages have to say on the subject. And, this is a very prudent way of starting any sefer. So if you ever want to write a book about some Torah subject, you'll know that you're reading a kosher book if you start your book with a travail over whether the actual presence of such a book should be in existence at all. And it's a very good way to open your book to a reader, because you're showing your humility. You're sort of saying, well, I don't know if this book is really needed, because it's an important subject enough for me to devote time to compile it and research it and write it and put it together. But why hasn't another book already been out that does this in a way better than I can do? And so therefore, if there is a book out there that's already out there that can do the subject way better justice than I can ever do, then I would be committed to pointing people in the direction of this particular sefer. Because ultimately you will only ever write and publish a sefer if there is some sort of perceived lacking, which is a huge call for a person to make, especially, where we are in terms of history, in that, the Torah and the scriptures have been around for centuries and accompanied mankind. We're sort of coming to the end of the kind of the act, the last act, and we're making the assumption that we're going to put out a book that's required on a subject in this last generation, which definitely could happen. But we have to go about finding out whether we're embarking on something that has merit, or it's only going to be, at the very least, it'll be a waste of time, and at worst it could have a detrimental effect, because we could have it could be something that's considered heresy. We certainly don't want to be, we don't want to go down that route. So with that said, we are briefly going to be looking at the Shemona Esrei, the standing Amidah, the 18 benediction prayer that most Orthodox Jewish males will pray at least 3 times a day, which is a one-stop shop. It has everything. And then from there, we're going to look at signs of hatred. So, some fellow observant person, whether it be a fellow Noahide or an religious Orthodox Jew, that in some way has done something that has caused a person to feel wronged, that they've been wronged. And so we're going to look at, how we harbor these feelings of feeling that we've been wronged by somebody, and how, this can often lead to disastrous situations down the track. Okay, so midway down page 98, growth with action, the Shemona Esrei. Before you start the Shemona Esrei, you should spend a brief moment thinking that now you are going to speak to Hashem, who is the Melech, Malachi HaMelakim, that is the King of Kings. The King of the universe is condescending to listen to you, and so you will thank him for that, saying, "Blessed are you, Hashem, who hears prayer. We are grateful that you listen with compassion to the prayers of Israel." That's how you should start your Shemona Esrei. So it's always a good policy to take time to pause and think about what it is you're about to actually do in terms of your prayer. And in this case, the Shemona Esrei, which is arguably the most important aspect of prayer. And you shouldn't just launch into it immediately. You need to stop and pause and realize whom it is you are standing in front of. You might find that you need to go and brush your teeth. You need to go and comb your hair. You need to go and put on something appropriate. You're wearing your clothes you just did your yard work in. And this is not going to help you in your kavana of reciting the Shemona Esrei, because you're not really convinced that you're standing in front of the Creator of the universe, because you're covered in cut grass debris, or you've been cleaning the house and you're still smelling of bleach, and you just slap on a kippah, you slap on a head covering, and you shut the door, and then you're sitting there and you're painting clothes. You've been painting the house. This is somebody that doesn't really believe they're standing in front of the Creator of the universe. They're just ticking a box. Don't let that be you. Do whatever you can to convince yourself on a subconscious level that you are coming before the King of the universe, and this should be a kind of a fairly intense affair. If you're more nervous about fronting yourself up for a progress report from your employer, a one-on-one meeting in a conference room after your 6-month probation is finished and your heart's pounding, and then you go to the Shemona Esrei and you're yawning, you've got some you're prioritizations all over the place. So think about that. Just think about that. You're standing before the Creator of the universe. At a base level, there should be some sort of trembling involved. And you should be attired in at least some sort of appropriate way. There was a Jewish mechanic in Israel, covered in grease, covered in work, covered in oil from working all day, working on cars. He had a clothes hanger in a separate room that had an area for him to read a sefer. He would wash his hands as best he could, and he would over his overalls he would put on a suit jacket. He would wear his kippah and put on a hat over the top, and then he would go and he would pray. And then after his prayer, he would take off his suit jacket and his hat and his kippah and go back into the workshop and work on the car. So even a mechanic, somebody who works on cars, at different times of the day when he prays, he will go to some trouble to attire himself appropriately to be convincingly standing in front of the Creator of the universe. You're not really convinced that you're standing in front of the Creator of the universe if you're praying to Hashem, in your bikini, you're not really convinced, and you're not convincing anyone else. It is stylish today among Frum Jews to talk about Shimrat HaLashon, that is guarding the tongue, and being wary of Lashon Hara. But the Kofetz Chaim, that's gossip. But the Kofetz Chaim, the one who desires life. This is a rabbi who spent considerable years toiling over the subject of clean speech, and was really the forerunner in the Jewish world to really put the subject of Shimrat HaLashon up in some intense lights, so to speak. So people realize that a lot of the trouble that we get into is due to the misuse of our mouths, even to the point where it can actually shorten our lives. If we don't exercise some type of control over our mouths, it could literally shorten our lives, our time here on earth. And the Chofetz Chaim, he is, wrote most extensively on the subject. But the Chofetz Chaim, in his famous book on this subject, explains that it is impossible for a person to fulfill the mitzvah of Shimrat HaLashon if his mind harbors poor midot, that is, poor character traits, and that the opposite that are the opposite of Shimrat HaLashon. So, in other words, the Chofetz Chaim is saying that if you are inwardly running a person down, but outwardly saying all the right things and speaking respectfully about the person, or interacting with the person in a respectful manner, but inwardly you're tearing them apart, and you want to get revenge on them, then ultimately you are not following the path of Shimrat HaLashon. You're committing a transgression, even though you haven't utilized your tongue. The motor that propels a person's tongue, because a person should only speak from what's in his heart. He shouldn't speak, words that aren't coming from within him. Ultimately, and then eventually you will say them anyway. So a person really is doing the opposite of obeying the laws of Shimrat HaLashon. For example, if a person has in his mind nekama, that is revenge, or nitira, which is bearing a grudge, against another from Jew, when it will be impossible for him to restrain his tongue from sin, then it will be impossible for him to restrain his tongue from sin. If a person is not careful to avoid sin of feeling hatred or will toward other people, he will find himself speaking ill of them. And it's inevitably, if you have ill feelings towards somebody, it will come out. Recently, there was a particular individual in the Messianic world, and I wasn't really keen on this individual, and kind of kept a lid on it for a while. But eventually, I spoke up and said, this is not somebody that I'm happy with. Now, in this particular situation, there's some points that generally concern me about the individual, but the point that I'm trying to make is that I sort of kept a clamp on my tongue for a period of time, but eventually I said the truth. There was a few things that shifted around and I could be more open with what I wanted to share. But you'll find that whether there's something that you have in your heart, whether it be genuine or whether it be something that you shouldn't hold on to, eventually it's going to come out through your lips. It's just a matter of time. And so if you're harboring thoughts of revenge or you're bearing a grudge, and it's it's something that's emotionally driven, and you're holding on to it, you've got to stop and you've got to sit and look in the mirror, so to speak, and self-reflect and say, you know what, ultimately it's because of my misdeeds that caused this situation to transpire, where I was called out. Maybe you were called out publicly by somebody, and this was somebody else who was known to be very observant, somebody who fears Hashem, and you're now been bearing a grudge against this person for a long period of time, and this grudge has grown and festered, and now you can't stand the person, but ultimately the person is observant, the person is probably more observant than you, and you've got to realize that this thing wouldn't have happened if you had behaved yourself like you should have. And just because it all of a sudden you were found out and it all came out, and then maybe somebody came in and kind of threw a little bit of additional petrol on the fire, and you thought, this fire's enough punishment for what I've done, and you're feeling that now the punishment is exceeding what your perception of how much you should be punished for. It doesn't matter. You've got to go, ultimately, whatever happens, this is only going to be for the good of my neshama, and this is only going to cleanse me if I allow it to be something that atones for my wrongdoing. But if I go on the warpath and start, taking revenge or responding harshly, publicly or critically to whatever it is, then I'm actually undoing all this potential atonement and potential that I've been given to have my soul cleaned on this side of the veil. Because that's the thing, if you've done something wrong, you want to kind of receive as much punishment for the thing that you've done wrong now on the side of mercy, than actually have to receive the punishment on the other side of the veil of Emet, where there is no mercy, because there's no more opportunity that's availed you when you pass on to that other side, because all the truths of the universe and Hashem are now a shining reality. So there's no quarter can be given, or no mercy can be given to beyond what you have managed to achieve when you're alive on earth. You can't beg for extra mercy during your judgment in the Beit Din of Shemayim. That's it. There's a cutoff point. They've just got to now scrutinize everything and bring everything into alignment and do justice, to bring justice and right measure and measure for measure. Midah kineged midah. Okay. Growth with action, recognizing the signs of hate. Imagine coming across someone who sees you, but who purposely walks across the street to avoid a meeting. That is an indication of hatred at some level. That person is sonei belev. He bears a hatred in his heart, and he violates a negative commandment of the Torah. You should not hate your brother in your heart. Recently, I went to a function where we had a guest speaker speaking, and there was somebody at the function that runs a congregation interstate, and even the guest speaker himself, and I was there, and I was never got an opportunity to introduce myself to the guest speaker or to the gentleman that ran the congregation interstate. We got there, I met some familiar faces and sat down, but I was kind of interested by the fact that, neither of these two individuals came up to say hello to myself, like it was their function. I was attending their function, and I just found it a bit weird, and the guy interstate, he and his wife actually left early, and I didn't sort of get a chance to say hello, and there were plenty of opportunities that they could have perhaps come and said hello, but I'm there as a guest. It's not usually the guest's sort of area to go in and introduce themselves. Normally, the host will introduce themselves, or anyway, it is what it is. But I kind of felt that there was some sort of ill feeling there. People were sort of willfully going out of their way to avoid me. I was asked to attend, and I attend upon being asked. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure why I got asked to attend, because when I got there, I kind of felt a little bit invisible by some of the key people. Not that I'm anyone special, but I just so you have to be aware that how you feel about a person is how you act. If somebody's going to kind of give you the cold shoulder, then there's a good chance that the person's got some issues, and so you just got to do whatever you can to find out why might they have that this person have particular issues toward me, and act in a way that's going to be blameless as best as you can. Many people are on the lookout for trouble and machloket, that is disputation. Active machloket commonly involves lashon hara, and it stems from having poor midot, having poor character traits. Thus, the Kovetz Chaim says, for someone to be a Shimrat HaLashon person, he must be sure to work on his character and develop good midot, good character traits. Otherwise, it's impossible. So the function of being one who guards his mouth and his tongue is to work on the mind. Now, the interesting thing that this paragraph just brought up was the possibility receiving a little bit of a cold shoulder, so to speak, may stem from the fact that they have view that they feel that they have different views of the Torah than I do. Now, almost certainly that's the case. But that doesn't mean that we can, ignore each other or give each other a hard time. We can just agree to disagree. We're still, largely on the same page with a fair few amount of issues. Let's get on with that and move forward and stop, going back a mile to have a fight all the time. Rabbeinu said, I just thought I'd bring that up. Rabbeinu Sadir Goen says that hating a fellow Jew is one reason why people are not frum. A person can't be a truly frum Jew if he hates another frum Jew. Such a person inevitably starts looking for faults in his fellow Jews. That leads to thinking that frum Jews are no good in general, resulting in seeds of apikorsut, that is heresy, being planted in the mind. And even though he never actually becomes apikorsut, the beginnings are there. A person who harbors ill will towards people who serve Hashem should know that he himself is not really a frum Jew. So this is very much what happened with Korah in the wilderness. He was a frum Jew. He was somebody who enjoyed the privilege of being part of transporting the furniture for the Beit HaMikdash when the children of Israel were on the move. So he wasn't, just sort of your average, Jew in the wilderness. He was, this guy had some pull, and he was known as one of the most wealthiest people. It's ironic to think that, the most wealthiest person in the wilderness was destroyed by his own jealousy. What is a person who has the most money among the entire community of Israelites in the wilderness? What have they got to be jealous about? Apparently quite a lot, to the point that their jealousy had them killed in the wilderness. And ironically, it's not like all their possessions went to those that are less fortunate within the encampment. We're told that all their possessions were consumed and swallowed up by the ground, by the earth. And so this person, this individual, Korah, and his rabble that he accrued, they were frum, and Moshe and Aaron were frum, and they had a disagreement. They had a wrong perception, and in Korah's case, it was driven because of jealousy. And so you end up hating a person that has fear of Hashem. You end up hating someone Hashem loves, and so you're departing from the Torah. From the top end, so to speak, and you're from the bottom end, because you're stitching together a garment with one hand, and yet you're unraveling the thread that you're stitching with the other unknowingly. It's a sort of a great analogy that you hear sometimes in the Torah world. I also found many examples of the importance of the mind in practicing Avot Hashem, serving Hashem, in the accounts of their character traits and practices that we receive from them in our tradition. These are accounts which they gave when they are asked about such matters. One such is, as our Chazal said, how did you live to such a ripe old age? Because remember, we're talking about the sages here. People inquired when they saw a man of very old age, as to what zikut, what merit did he have to cause him to live so long. In order of cases, in a number of cases, such a man would give an answer which has been handed down to us from the way they answered. One can see that it was their observance of the mitzvot of the mind, to which they attributed zikut, long life, merited long life, of arikat yomim, which is Hebrew for long life. So, the way they conducted their mind and their outlook, they didn't ever let their mind become deceived with perceived slights or, things that another person was supposedly have done that was against them or anything. They were too concerned about their right standing to be worried about anybody else's standing. Like these. They were constantly looking at refining themselves, improving themselves every single day. They were constantly engaged in the study of Torah and the learning of Torah to actively go about looking to improve something that needed work. And so they were constantly working on themselves. So they never had the the mind, to be idle enough to listen to the naysayers or the critiques. And obviously anybody that, wanted to give them, constructive criticism, they would listen to and they would learn from, but they wouldn't get involved in nonsense, and this merited them long life. We see another proof to the importance of intention in the Torah. This is from tractate. This is from Bamidbar 35:11. Actually, the old age, the ripe old age, and the controlling one's thoughts. That comes to us by way of tractate Megillah 27b. Sorry, I forgot to quote that. And the next proof of the importance of the attention of the Torah, this actually comes from Bamidbar 35:11, which states that if somebody killed another Jew unintentionally, he is not subject to the death penalty. Now, in killing a person, he committed a very serious sin, but he is not punished with misah, with the death penalty. What was missing? The mind was missing, since he didn't intend to do it. That saves him from misah, from the death penalty. Now, so you can have two people that have pushed somebody off a cliff. One person gets the death penalty, another person walks off scot-free. The person that gets the death penalty hated the person. They hated the person yesterday and the day before that, and they had an intense dislike for him. Maybe it was a family member or a nephew, and so they were involved with something that took place near a dangerous cliff. And so this person didn't take necessary precautions of safety. And, maybe in one scenario, they didn't actually really push them, but they deliberately went out of their way to not put safety harnesses on, leading to the death of this person that they despised. So they're still guilty. If they pushed them off, obviously they're guilty of murder. And if they didn't, obviously push them off, but they had the intention and hope in their heart of hearts that they would fall off and die, and they did, then obviously the person is still guilty of a murder, whether you look at it as manslaughter, not being quite as extreme, but at the end of the day, the person, their lack of safety led to the person's death, right? So these two scenarios, these people are, going to be in trouble. Now, on another occasion, a person gets pushed off a cliff. That person comes up behind his friend to play a prank on him, scares him, and the other person is so frightened that his natural reaction is to turn around, swing around, and react at the noise of the sound and push the individual away from him, thus pushing him off the cliff. And in addition, that person never had a problem with that person that pranked him like that. He never had a grudge against him. He never had any ill will or hatred towards him, and it was evident over a period of time that he was somebody who was loved by him. And it just so happened this person chose a poor place to do a practical joke, and the person just swung around. His knee-jerk reaction was to push him, and he thus fell off the cliff to his death. This person is not guilty of this act whatsoever. They said the same about one who did a mitzvah but did not intend to do it l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, that he does not receive any reward for it. Thus it is the mind that causes an act to be deserving of punishment, and it is the mind that causes an act to be worthy of reward. So this is why in the scriptures itself, in the Tanakh, you'll see in most cases that Hashem rewards a person according to what they do, according to their actions, right? And you don't necessarily see passages that say Hashem rewards a person for the right thoughts, because a person can think the right thoughts, and if they don't manifest them into action or at least speech, they're still going to miss the mark and commit an aveira, and they're not going to embrace the mitzvah. Now, certainly, if a person can't do a particular mitzvah, whether it be take the form of a speech or action or both, and circumstances have disallowed them to be able to engage in that, of course they're going to get the merit for that as though they did it, because despite their best efforts, they weren't able to achieve that mitzvah, but they did everything to try and do it, but it just didn't work out. And so that's how a person is judged in the realm of the thought, because the thought is the actuator, or it is the propellant behind the intent of the action or the thing the person says. And so this is how we're judged in the world of thought, because it depends on what type of thinking was behind our wrong deed or our right deed. In some cases we could have every intention to cause somebody harm, but circumstances and situation occurs that instead of doing the person grave injury, we actually cause them to receive a huge reward somehow. And so this is not going to be attributed to us as a mitzvah. It will be attributed to us as an avera, because we didn't have that intention. We set everything up so the person would be injured. And as unlikely as you would think, it turned out this person actually ended up, being the huge recipient of some reward, or maybe they drank some magic elixir, making them really strong instead of it killing them or whatever. Use your imagination. And so therefore, the person is not going to get the merit or be acknowledged as being, have committed a mitzvah, as have performed a mitzvah, but rather have committed a avera, even though that person prospers out of it, because you set them up to fail. But Hashem decided to have things fall in the person's favor. Just because it ends up in their favor doesn't mean now you're going to get a reward from that. No. You will be looked upon as though you committed that act. I think we'll leave it there. That takes us to page 101. If you have any questions or comments, if you've got a query about anything I said, it didn't sound right to you, let me know in the comments. It's great to be able to engage with people and talk to people. Thanks seems like I've got a regular 2 viewers that are watching the videos pretty much straight away and commenting. I want to say to you guys, thank you so much. I think I know who you are. At least one. I think I know who one of you are. But whoever you are, thank you so much for supporting this channel and commenting, which helps with the algorithm. And those of you that haven't done that, please consider saying hello. Definitely hit a like. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and please share this video and let people know about this really important series put out by Rabbi Avigdor Miller's students. Rabbi Avigdor Miller's new commentary and translation of Duties of the Mind. Anyway, until next time, Hashem willing, bye for now.